is being subsidized by those who have the capacity to pay. Until we have a cost-reflective tariff, there is going to be no development, because it is the money that comes in ultimately that will be used to augment, develop, and increase the capacity we all desire. Thank you.
I keep telling people, total megawatts produced in this country cannot power some airports in some part of the world. So when we sit down here and talk about electricity, we actually haven't started at all. I'm sure Dr. Naji would confirm that. Because if you go to Dubai more alone has over 10,000 megawatts. And here we're still struggling to have 4,000 megawatts on the grid. So now, the thing about EcoDisco and why we bought into it, even before we got into it, we were told that daily allocation to us was about 450 megawatts. But since we got into Eco, maximum, sometimes the average of what we get is about 240. So then again, people don't understand the difference between the distribution company, the transmission company, and the generating companies. What we do, we don't just take your light, because everybody says, oh, since EcoDisco came, we don't have light anymore. And I tell them, no, we don't produce the light. They say, no, you people need to be thrown out because you don't give us light anymore. You don't give us this anymore. But people need to understand that there are certain value chains. We have transmission, and we have generation, and we have distribution. We are on the far end of it, distribution. It's what you give to us that we give to you. We do not keep anything behind. So everything we get, we give to you. If we keep anything behind, it means we're just burning money. Again, this is the only country that every year, the first 250,000 of your money is thrown into a dustbin and burnt. And that's because that's for diesel. So you just wake up one night, you burn your money because you're burning it on nothing. And it's ridiculous. Now, the reason we're talking today is that we want to improve electricity supply to Lagos. That is not easy. Like Ayo said, you can't wake up one night and say, okay, there's electricity. Somebody came to me some days ago and said, oh, you can produce so much, because even on the Lagos axis, there's a lot of gas. We investigated this gas. Total gas production on those fields cannot power more than 500 megawatts. So I'm sitting here talking to Dr. Ige and saying, look, what are you guys going to do about gas? Because the main constraint today is gas. If there is gas and people have easy access to gas, then we don't have a lot of problems. So gas is a major issue. These are problems that we understand, and these are problems we need to get around trying to solve. College just said that people just go to gas pipelines and do something to it. But the question is, what have you done to the people that have done that to gas pipelines? But anyway, we at EcoDisco, because I don't want to take more than 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman is looking at me. We at EcoDisco have started the process of trying to improve generation to Lagos. Right now, I can say we're leading this particular process. We've advertised, we're working with NEC. We've listed about 45 companies to do embedded. We are talking to 2 companies on captive power. So right now, we're going through the process of pre-qualification. And this is just a short-term gap that we want to use so that we can get power to the people. But our long-term projects are like having to bring in about 500 megawatts into our own local grid. But then again, look at the 3 value chains we have: transmission, generation, and distribution. Even we have capability to supply 700 megawatts today. 700. But what do we get? 240. Sometimes 100 and something. And to make it worse, the transmission company have introduced under-frequency relays. What that does, if you are in Lagos today, you know that sometimes they take your light. In 2 minutes, they bring your light. In another minute, they take your light. What this does to you is that rather than having a full system collapse on the system, they've introduced these frequency relays so that their own network is protected. but protection at the cost of all your refrigerators and TVs and everything probably getting blown at home, because somebody has called me and said, you are paying for my TV. I said, what are you talking about? So these are the issues that we have. And Mr. Chairman, I'm concluding right now. So anyway, we are bringing light to Lagos. We couldn't have asked for a better partner, and we're working with them seriously. They've been very cooperative. We talk to them. But the thing now is that when the governor was talking, he talked about supplying light to some social clubs. And I was wondering whether that was our business or that was the state governor's. So basically, these are issues we need to address with NEC as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Charles, thank you. I'd like to have Damilola go first before David, because they mentioned you twice, so we'll have to have the last say.
Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Like the governor said, Lagos State government is committed to power generation and just bringing more power into Lagos. In order to do that, we need the distribution companies. I mean, we can't give power to everybody we would like to give power to because of regulations as well. So our focus has really been optimal public delivery, making sure the public service is getting the adequate power. And when the governor mentioned the hospitals and all the different things, it's very important to know that 4 of the major hospitals in the country now have 24-hour power, you know, some of the police stations and a lot of street lighting. So we've really focused on millions of Nigerians instead of just capturing the same plant that we put on the island, 10 megawatts, could go into a dolphin estate, but it would not capture as many people and as many people coming in and out. In terms of the distribution companies, in Lagos State government, we're trying to come up with a one-stop shop for distribution companies. That means all the complaints, all the issues they have with right-of-way, building permits, anything they have would be actually dealt with high-level officers all in the same office, which would avoid them from going from ministry to ministry. Because even as government, we calculated that if they were meant to go to all the different ministries and agencies, there will be about 15. And if we want to accelerate electricity supply, we can't do that. I mean, in my office, I chair a meeting every month on the NIPP projects, and we've managed to resolve a lot of things. We have, I think we call you more than you call us in terms of delivery. We try and get information from you about when you don't have enough power so we can, you know, send it to the citizens. I mean, I know how many text messages I get, and I'm referenced as NEPA and Electricity Board. So it's one of these, I think there's importance in communication between the DISCO telling Lagos State government what they want to do. But I don't think that stops Lagos State government in terms of its IPP and its energy development plan. Because our energy development plan, as I said earlier, is focused on public services, public utilities, waterworks, hospitals. And it is very important, especially with the issues you're facing with gas issues and not getting enough power. And we understand how long it takes to build a power plant. For us to continue on our strife, the only difference it means is the power that would have been generated to these facilities can now be given to different parts of the public. Before I conclude, because I've spoken about audits, but I think it's very, very important to know how much power is needed in different parts of Lagos. I mean, we've done some work. However, it's very important for the DISCOs as well to really, really emphasize what is needed, especially when it comes to commerce and industry. Even before residential, I know some people will be upset with me, because if you power commerce and industry, you're powering where people work, you're powering where people live, and it has a bigger economic effect. So I would really encourage more audits. I would encourage that we sit down maybe a bit more and understand what the whole DISCO plan is, because it has to tie into our plans. I mean, the governor said many times, if he's building a new road, he'll want to know if a distribution network is going to go past it, because he doesn't want to now cut that road again, and then you say you need gas and he'll cut that road again. There needs to be a synchronized plan between the distribution companies and Lagos State. In terms of, there's only one more thing I have is probably in terms of the tariff. I mean, I have statistics from Shomolu printers paying 58 naira, some banks on Marina paying 98 naira. I really would like if we looked at this issue of MD customers and really looked at how much people can actually pay instead of assuming they can't pay. So we have these tariffs. So we can't try alternative fuels. If there's a problem with gas, there's CNG, there's LPG. But because it costs so much, you cannot utilize these fuels because it's not natural gas. And, so that means that you're limiting the distribution companies from getting supply from the grid, because embedded generation is expensive. IPPs are expensive. But in Lagos State, there has been a reduction of the cost because we've eliminated almost 200 generators. We're not running on diesel anymore. And the simple noise and air pollution factor of it should make us really consider the tariff again. Thank you.
Thank you, David. James, please. David, now it's your turn to address.
I'd like to take 3 key points in my contribution. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of concern about natural gas. But what we're experiencing right now is an anomaly. And I'd like to explain that. As at the end of 2010, the total gas supply to the power sector was about 300 million cubic feet per day. Today, over the last 3 years, we have tripled the gas supply capacity to the power sector. And we have an installed capacity of 1,000 million cubic feet per day for the power sector. In addition to that, over that period of time, we have grown gas supply to support the astronomical growth in demand from the non-power sector, like the cement and all the other manufacturing sectors. But despite that growth, people are not seeing power. And that's the challenge we face. We've experienced, like has been said a couple of times here, we continue to experience outage in our supply infrastructure. There's never been a time in this 3-year period that the consumers have seen the full essence of that supply that we have grown in the last 3 years, which is very painful for us as well on the supply side. There are 2 critical pipelines in the country, the Escravos-Lagos pipeline and the Transforcados pipeline. Whenever these pipelines are out, and in fact, they've been out consistently, when one is out, the other one is down. Whenever those pipelines, each of those pipelines goes out, we'll lose immediately about 30% of our supply capacity, right? And like we showed the last time, for over 7 to 8 months, we lost the Escravos-Lagos pipeline. Just as we fixed that pipeline and restored supply, we lost the Transforcados pipeline. I've just been told this morning that Transforcados is back. Yeah. But also on the eastern side of the country, almost every 2 weeks we have the vandalization of the Trans-Niger pipeline. When the Trans-Niger pipeline is down, the Afam power plant is down. Yeah, because we also cannot evacuate condensate and so on. So the issue really is this. We have grown gas supply in the most aggressive manner over the last 3 years. So that's one thing. We are not quite where we ought to be yet, but it's important to note that with the rate at which we have grown gas supply, there is no reason why Lagos State should feel the kind of pain it's feeling today, like anybody else in the country. But until we fix the problem of vandalization, any attempt, whether it's embedded or non-embedded, is not likely to deliver the solution, because we've got to confront that problem and fix it. So, first point is that what we feel today is an anomaly. Supply has grown at an aggressive rate. It's grown to 1,000 million, and that in itself is not quite where it should be, but it's a major step from where we were before. And I hope that if we can get consistency in the delivery without this vandalization, people can truly feel the impact of the growth that has happened over the last 3 years in the gas sector. The second point is this. There's been a lot of talk about embedded or non-embedded. But overall, if the total gas available to the grid, the total power available to the grid is increased, the power coming to Lagos will definitely increase proportionately. So at the moment, the power sector has done significantly well in boosting the amount of power generating capacity on ground. And if we can fire those power plants, then definitely we can increase power to Lagos. Now, where are we? There are a couple of realities with respect to this. A lot of these power plants are located on our western infrastructure. And it's in that infrastructure that we have grown supply, like I said, over the last 3 years. But if you put in perspective, about 90% of the total gas reserves and production in Nigeria comes from the 5 major IOCs, Shell, Exxon, Total, and Co. Exxon is located at Akwa Ibom Axis offshore. Ajip is located in Rivers State. Total is located in Rivers State. Shell is half Rivers and half on the west, which means that almost 60% of our capacity to produce gas or supply is on the eastern part of the country, and the balance is on the western part of the country. At the moment, there is no connection between the east and the west. And so we are unable to fully utilize our supply potential in natural gas, which is why we have accelerated the east-west gas pipeline. That pipeline, as we speak, the pipes arrived over the Christmas period and construction is starting. So we hope that over time we'll bridge that. In the meantime, we need to intensify supply to power plants in the east where there is gas, and then maximize what we can on the west. And a lot of things we're doing. You continue to see steady improvements in the western supply over the next couple of months, subject, of course, to vandalization. Then finally, I think the idea of embedded solutions is also quite important, and there's been some examples already. But to make that work, our entire supply system, because we put the gas in the grid. Once the gas is in the grid, it can go to the power plants, whether they're for the grid or whether they're embedded. It really doesn't matter. Once the gas gets into the pipeline, it can go anywhere. So fundamentally, to make any of this work, we need to complete all our infrastructure connectivity, which we're working on, and the infrastructure work is the most aggressive it has ever been at the moment. We complete that infrastructure. We complete the liberalization of the gas market, which we're doing quite well. Our gas pricing is increasing, and by the end of this year, should be at export parity. Put in the gas agreements. I think when all these things are done, there should be sufficient liquidity in the gas sector to support all these embedded solutions. But of course, all of this is subject to the fact that the infrastructure is not attacked or vandalized going forward. Thank you.
What role can biogas play in delivering power to Lagos? Agege area of the state, with a large population, hosts the largest abattoir in the country, with installed capacity to slaughter over 6,000 cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, and generate tons of organic wastes that can be utilized to produce gas, to provide power to the complex and the environment.
We have 3 questions up there. Why are we still flaring gas in Nigeria? By Mrs. Shola Uru. The question was asked by the Honorable Commissioner for Commerce and Industry in Lagos State. What penalty will you recommend for acts of vandalism, since they appear to have adverse consequences on the greatest number of people? That's from Mrs. Aluko, Special Advisor, Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget. Can we not make gas to power a national priority? I heard the murmuring that it already is, but perhaps we need more illumination on that. So if we could just take those 3. We have several more. If we take those 3.
I really think Lagos State shouldn't overwork itself in that particular area. The biogas, you have some region where they grow jatropha and different kinds of vegetation that you can use for that. But Lagos State has a lot of other fuel that it can use without having to resort to biogas. I know, I'm sorry, I call them tree huggers, that they would like a more natural way of generating power. But I don't think Lagos State needs to concern itself too much with that.
I think the point about gas to power being a national priority, like you said, gas to power is a national priority, and it has been ever since. About 75% of the total gas we produce in the country is delivered to the power sector. And whenever there is an attack on our infrastructure, gas to power is prioritized over gas to industries and any other. With respect to gas flares, it's important to note that we have steadily reduced gas flaring in Nigeria as a result of all the reforms that we've been doing. So the growth in gas supply that I've talked to you about over the last 3 years, a part of that actually comes from gas flares, basically. We have reduced gas flaring in Nigeria from over 2.5 billion cubic feet per day at its peak to around about 1.3 billion cubic feet per day currently. And over the next 2 to 3 years, when some of the projects we're working on mature, we expect to take out an additional 500 to 600 million cubic feet per day of currently flared gas. So gas flaring is actually on a steady decrease in the country. With respect to penalty for vandalism, I just think we need something that is much more severe than we have currently in terms of a very long imprisonment. For example, for vandalism will be a major deterrent to the people. Definitely something in excess of 10 years would be my suggestion. Thank you.
That is, of course, provided we can enforce it, because one of our biggest challenges here is actually enforcing the laws. Even if we can enforce minimal penalty, that will help reduce the incidents. Now, this batch of questions, please.
Well, there's a question supposed to be streamed very soon, but it's Charles and Kola. I like the spirit of Kola competition, that is collaborating while competing, between ECO and Ikeja Disco. Do we have any assurances that this will be sustained without, however, leading to a duopoly? A duopoly, or a sort of cartel. The question is that will ECO and Ikeja Discos not create a cartel of their own? That's what the question means.
A duopoly is not going to happen because both companies don't serve the same customers. That's a simple and straightforward answer to that question. What you have is the interesting situation in Lagos State where you have a demarcation of Lagos into two separate territories served by one company each. All right? So you're not likely to have a duopoly. What you do have, as a matter of fact, is a de facto monopoly. And what that does is that it creates the basis for regulation, because then the regulator, which is NERC, must then become or take the place of or be a proxy for a competitor. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that by setting standards of behavior with regard to customer care and service. And if you do a little bit of research, you will see that there's a whole slew of regulations that deal with how to manage customers. Of course, the question is, how are we enforcing those? And the reality is that you have a market that has only in the last 4 or 5 months actually turned around to beginning to regard customers as being very important people. And so there will be a slow uptake in how to deal with those customer care issues. But I'm sure the discos will be able to say for themselves what they're doing in that regard. The other major way is in the way we look at the tariff and how we set the tariff. And the point of view that we take in tariff setting is that if you leave market forces alone, effectively in a monopoly, you are not really going to achieve what market forces themselves were classically meant to achieve, which is competitive tension between two players, because there's no second player in the territory of each of these discos. So we set benchmarks of behavior using the tariff. And so, for instance, a disco or a generating company will recover a lot more if it tries to rise above the efficiency thresholds that the tariff themselves implicitly set. That's the only way disco can make money, by reducing its losses, for instance, by managing its operating costs, because you've got a certain benchmark, a certain level at which your operating costs will not be permitted to grow. Otherwise, if you do that, then you will constantly have the tariff going up, and there's no incentive for the distribution companies to keep their costs down. So really, that is, I guess, is the answer in a nutshell. In terms of competition, a lot of the emphasis, a lot of the attention will have to be on NERC and how NERC or the regulator behaves. But I'll say one thing in addition to that. Because you have these two distribution companies focused only on customers who are in the Lagos State area, I foresee in the very near future a situation arising where Lagos State itself begins to become a regulator for those discos, particularly in regard to consumer issues and how those consumer issues are managed. Because the Constitution is quite clear that where service is provided entirely within the boundary of a particular state, there is a concurrent responsibility between the federal and the state governments, and usually the federal government will leave the management of certain issues, like the issues that deal with the care and the welfare of the people, to that state government. So what I expect is that Lagos State government, like it has done with water, will begin to develop the capacity for also managing the customer and consumer care issues from a regulatory point of view for people that live within the boundaries of the state.
The truth is, we cannot continue with this lamentation. The telecommunication companies did not have zones to take off with. Now, could we, for the time being, look towards purchase of excess electricity from the nearest country while we get to put necessary infrastructure in place?
15% of the energy that comes into Lagos State moves on to Benin and Togo, because that power is also by international treaty required to be sold to those two countries, and that's a reality. Another small percentage, something like 8-10%, also goes to Niger Republic on a daily basis. So we provide for those countries, and really, if I may say this, what we should be doing as a country is looking at the kind of policies and getting past these obstacles that we have that enable us to actually deliver energy, gas, and power to the rest of West Africa. I think what has happened in Central Europe in recent times, Russia, Ukraine, and Western Europe, shows the kind of power that the country has. Soft power, which is actually quite strategic when it's able to take responsibility for delivering energy within a particular region. And that really is part of what we should be doing with ECOWAS. But of course, charity always has to begin at home. So if we deliver to our own people, then we can begin to look outwards and satisfy the huge demand that is out there in West Africa, a region of something like 350, 400 million people.
Why are IPPs complaining of shortage of gas supply when other private gas consumers are not? This is from Wola Ojoye. Then it appears to me that the government needs to privatize the gas production and supply chain and end the monopoly of the gas company. Private sector investment will go into gas production and supply. I am also sure private capital will find solutions to vandalization, since they will protect their investment and returns. That's from Mrs. Nana Daudu.
Let me start on the IPPs. I think we need to understand the difference between those who have purchased the power plants and pure IPPs. They're different. The Egbin power plant and the Olorunshogo and so on and so forth, they are government-owned IPPs. They're government-owned power plants, privatized. So their conception and the way they were built wasn't by the kind of funding that IPPs get built. So, in fact, you can't actually say that there is really any IPP in Nigeria that is built except for the IOC power plants. They are not even pure, their funding is not even that way, and they supply themselves gas. The Aba power plant is the one that has been completed. Now you have Azura that is oncoming. So they are quite different. Now they complain about, I think the complaint is whether it is government-owned power plant or actual IPP. They complain because the gas simply is not there. And it's somewhat about pricing, the pricing regime. For the tariff to make sense, there's a certain kind of gas pricing that needs to be in place. And the other people